the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape.
Welcome to Real Talk Horror Edition. I'm your host Josh, here to guide you into the shadowy corners of the horror genre. The places where fear isn't just felt, but truly lived. Horror has the incredible ability to crawl into your skin, but psychological horror? That's a whole nother beast. It doesn't rely on jump scares or gore to terrify you. Instead, it gets inside your head, planting seeds of doubt and dread that linger. This episode continues our exploration of psychological horror, those films that transform the mind into the ultimate battleground. They make you question not just what you're seeing, but what the characters are experiencing, and sometimes even your own reality. We're in phase 2, focusing on a subcategory I like to call paranoia and the unknown. These are the stories that thrive on ambiguity, isolation, and the creeping sensation that something isn't quite right. Think about that feeling of unease when you're all alone, or the way paranoia can snowball into full-blown terror. These films capture that perfectly, showing us how fragile our sense of safety and reality can be. One of the films that truly nails this atmosphere is 2015's The Witch, a brilliant directorial debut by Robert Eggers. If you've seen it, you know it's not just a horror movie. It's a descent into the unsettling world of 17th century Puritanism, where faith, fear, and isolation collide in ways that are as psychologically haunting as they are visually striking. Today, we're going to unravel what makes The Witch a standout in this category, from its historical authenticity to its oppressive atmosphere and themes of paranoia. This is a film that demands to be dissected. So grab your favorite blanket, dim the lights, and let's dive into the unsettling brilliance of this modern classic. Let's talk about The Witch, a 2015 psychological horror masterpiece that cemented Robert Eggers as a director to watch. First, the essentials. The Witch, written and directed by Eggers himself, and it's remarkable how much of his vision feels fully realized for a debut feature. The film's haunting cinematography is courtesy of Jaron Blaschke, whose use of natural light and shadow creates an oppressive, otherworldly atmosphere. And then there's the chilling score by Mark Corvin, which is less a musical accompaniment and more a sonic nightmare. Every note and sound seems designed to unnerve you. The story is set in the 1630s in the unforgiving wilderness of New England. A deeply devout Puritan family is banished from their community over a religious dispute. They set out to build a new life on the edge of a dark and foreboding forest. But their isolation becomes a breeding ground for fear and suspicion. When their infant son mysteriously vanishes, the family's fragile unity begins to crumble. Their paranoia deepens as they blame supernatural forces and eventually each other for the tragedies that befall them. What follows is a slow, harrowing descent into madness, witchcraft, and fractured faith. Eggers' decision to use authentic 17th century dialogue drawn from historical texts adds to the unease. The language might take a moment to adjust to, but it truly immerses you in the time period and heightens the sense of realism. From the moment I saw the trailer, I was hooked. Those stark visuals, the oppressive atmosphere, and the pervasive dread hinted that this wasn't your typical horror film. It wasn't about jump scares or gore. It was about something deeper, something primal. What really intrigued me was Eggers' obsessive attention to detail. The costumes, the set design, Even the way the characters speak, it all feels ripped from history. It's rare to see a horror film so committed to historical authenticity, and yet, despite being steeped in the specific fears and superstitions of the 17th century, The Witch feels timeless. The themes of paranoia, isolation, and the breakdown of trust within a family, those are universal. And what struck me most on my first viewing was how much this film leaves open to interpretation. Is this a supernatural horror film about witchcraft? Or is it a psychological study of a family unraveling under the weight of their own fears and guilt? That ambiguity is where the film's true power lies. This invites you to project your own anxieties onto the story, making it a deeply personal and unsettling experience. If you haven't seen it, or if you have, you'll know by the end of this episode why The Witch deserves a place as one of the modern classics of psychological horror. One of the reasons The Witch resonates so deeply as a psychological horror masterpiece is its layered exploration of themes that tap directly into our primal fears and the fragility of the human mind. Let's break down some of the film's most compelling psychological elements. At its heart, The Witch is a study in how suspicion and paranoia can erode even the strongest familial bonds. As the family begins to unravel, we see how their deep-seated beliefs and fears are weaponized against one another. The ambiguous nature of the threats they face, are they supernatural or are they simply the result of psychological unraveling, heightens the tension. The family doesn't need an external antagonist. Their own mistrust is enough to tear them apart. Eggers crafts an environment where even the smallest of gestures or glances can carry immense weight. A whispered accusation, a hesitant touch, or an averted gaze fuels the flames of doubt, creating a toxic stew of paranoia. The dynamic plays out most vividly in the interactions between Thomasine and her family. As the eldest daughter, she becomes a scapegoat for their growing misfortune. The tension builds as Thomasine is accused of witchcraft, and you're left wondering, is she truly innocent, or has she been corrupted by the dark forces in the forest? The ambiguity forces us to question what's real and what's a product of the family's collective hysteria. Perhaps the film's greatest strength is its ability to blur the line between perception and reality. This isn't just a story about whether witches exist. It's about how fear and guilt can twist our perception of the world. The forest, a looming and malevolent presence, symbolizes this duality. It is a tangible threat, wild, untamed, and full of dangers. But it also serves as a metaphor for the family's psychological state. Their isolation amplifies their fears, and soon they see evil everywhere, in their surroundings, in each other, and even within themselves. Eggers keeps us on edge by refusing to offer definitive answers. Are the supernatural events real, or are they manifestations of a family's collective guilt and madness? This ambiguity makes The Witch far more unsettling than a straightforward horror film. The unease lingers because you're never quite sure where the truth lies. The characters in The Witch are not merely victims of their circumstances. They're deeply flawed individuals whose inner struggles drive the narrative. At the heart of the story is Thomasine, played brilliantly by Anya Taylor-Joy. She's the lens through which we experience much of the film, and her journey is one of the most compelling aspects. Thomasine's internal conflict is palpable. She struggles with her faith, her role within the family, and her emerging sense of self. as her family turns against her. She's forced to confront whether she will submit to the accusations or forge her own path, no matter how dark that path might be. William, the father, he embodies pride and dangers of unchecked piety. His unwavering belief in his own righteousness blinds him to the needs and fears of his family. Catherine, the mother, is consumed by grief and resentment, her faith crumbling under the weight of her losses. Together, their dynamic creates a powder keg of tension, with Thomasine caught in the middle. The younger siblings, Mercy and Jonas, add another layer of unease. Their eerie innocence and cryptic interactions with the family's goat, Black Phillip, blur the line between childish play and something far more sinister. Are these simply imaginative children, or are they conduits for dark forces? The forest itself is a character in the film, an unknowable, ever-present force that represents both literal and metaphorical dangers. Its vastness and darkness are terrifying, but it's what might be hiding within it that truly unsettles. This fear of the unknown is central to the film's psychological horror. The family's isolation amplifies their vulnerability, and the forest becomes a mirror for their deepest anxieties. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, and every unexplainable event feeds their paranoia. The unknown forces them to confront their greatest fears, the loss of faith, the fragility of the familial bonds, and the possibility that evil is not an external force, but something within themselves. In The Witch, the unknown isn't just a plot device, it's the very fabric of the film's horror. Eggers understands that we can't see is what we often find more terrifying than what we can see, and he uses this to devastating effect. The Witch becomes more than just a horror film. It is a meditation on fear, faith, and the human psyche. By weaving together themes of mind games, the blurred line between perception and reality, richly developed characters, and the ever-present fear of the unknown, Eggers has crafted a story that will linger in your mind long after it's over. It's not just about what happens to this family. It's about how easily fear can fracture the very foundations of who we are. Atmosphere and tone are the beating heart of The Witch, transforming it from a standard horror film into a deeply immersive psychological experience. Robert Eggers' meticulous attention to detail creates a world that is hauntingly beautiful and suffocatingly oppressive. Let's break it down. Eggers and cinematographer Jaron Blaschke create a visual style that is stark, minimalist, and deeply unsettling. Their use of natural lighting, particularly in outdoor scenes, lends the film this eerie authenticity. Shadows creep and linger, and the overcast skies seem to press down on the family, mirroring their emotional descent. Indoors, the natural light filters weakly through cracks and small windows, casting long shadows and giving the interior of the farmhouse a cold, unwelcoming feel. This reliance on natural light not only grounds the film in its historical setting, but also amplifies the sense of isolation and dread. The framing shots often feel deliberate and painterly, with the camera lingering on the barren landscape or the family members' anguished faces. The pacing forces us to sit with the characters' fears and anxieties rather than allowing for quick, distracting cuts. It's not just what's happening in the scene, it's the way the camera holds you there, refusing to let you look away. And the muted, earthy tones dominate the film's color palette, reinforcing the bleakness of the setting and the family's dire situation. There's little warmth or vibrancy here. Everything feels drained of life, as though the very environment has turned against them. Mark Corvin's score is an essential component of the film's psychological grip. From the opening moments, dissonant strings and unsettling drones establish a soundscape that feels otherworldly. The music doesn't guide your emotions as much as it heightens your unease. At times, it almost feels like the soundtrack is a malevolent presence lurking just off the camera's view. Equally powerful is the film's use of silence. There are long stretches where the absence of silence or absence of sound create an unbearable tension, broken only by the creak of wood, the faint rustle of leaves, or the distant cries of animals. These small, natural noises become deafening in the silence, and they turn the mundane into something sinister. Dialogue is sparse, and when characters do speak, their words are often hushed or strained, reflecting the weight of their fear and distrust. Whispers, in particular, are used to great effect, their intimacy making you feel as though you're eavesdropping on secrets that you're not meant to hear. The isolated farmhouse and the forest that encircles it are not just backdrops, they're integral characters in the story. The farmhouse, with its bare wooden walls and meager furnishings, feels like a home and more like a prison. Its small, confined spaces force the family into extreme close proximity, amplifying the tensions and leaving no room to escape from one another or from their growing paranoia. The building seems to absorb the family's despair, its creaking boards and dim interior echoing their unraveling psyche. Then there's the forest, an overwhelming presence throughout the film. Eggert uses it as both a literal and symbolic barrier. Its dense, dark expanse feels suffocating, a stark contrast to the barren openness of the farmland. The trees loom like silent witnesses, their shadows stretching toward the family like claws. The forest also represents the unknown, a place where danger lurks unseen and where the family's rigid faith and sense of order are powerless. It becomes a breeding ground for their fears, each rustle of leaves or crack of a branch feeding their belief that something evil lies just beyond their reach. Even the small details of the setting, the withered crops, the unrelenting gray skies, and the cold, unyielding soil serve to reinforce the family's vulnerability. They are utterly alone, cut off from the safety of their community, and surrounded by an environment that feels hostile at every turn. The combination of cinematography and sound design and setting creates an atmosphere that feels oppressive. Eggers doesn't rely on cheap jump scares or any over-the-top gore to unsettle us. Instead, he builds a world where the dread is baked into every frame, every sound, and every shadow. The atmosphere of The Witch lingers long after the credits roll, a testament to its ability to immerse us fully in its dark, unrelenting world. As we've said many times in this series, it's not just a film you watch, it's a film you feel. As though you've been pulled into its cold, gray expanse and left there to fend for yourself. And in that isolation, surrounded by the unknown, you begin to understand exactly what drives the family to the brink of madness. The characters in The Witch are not only deeply human, but also reflections of the film's central themes of paranoia, fanaticism, and isolation. Each member of the family contributes to the story's psychological tension in unique ways, and their complex dynamics drive the film's slow descent into chaos. At the heart of the story is Thomasine, played brilliantly by Anya Taylor-Joy in her breakout role. Thomasine's journey is one of forced self-discovery, thrust upon her by circumstances entirely beyond her control. She begins the film as a dutiful daughter, eager to please her parents despite the family's hardships. However, as the story progresses, she becomes the scapegoat for the family's growing fear and mistrust. Her reliability as narrator is constantly questioned. Is Thomasine a victim of her family's fanaticism, or is she hiding darker truths about her own nature? Eggers masterfully leaves this ambiguity intact, forcing us to grapple with the same doubts that plagued Thomasine herself. Her internal struggle is palpable. She wrestles with the guilt over her brother's disappearance, frustration at her parents' lack of trust, and fear of the unknown forces surrounding them. But beneath all that lies a burgeoning desire for freedom. Freedom from her family's oppressive expectations, from their rigid faith, and from the isolation of their circumstances. This tension between duty and rebellion gives Thomasine a psychological depth that elevates her beyond the typical horror protagonist. Her eventual choices feel both shocking and inevitable, the culmination of a harrowing journey that we in the audience have experienced right alongside her. The antagonist in The Witch operates on two levels, external and internal. Externally, there is the literal witch of the forest, a shadowy, malevolent figure whose presence looms over the film. She embodies the family's worst fears, a manifestation of the supernatural evil they believe lurks just beyond their grasp. The witch's actions are horrifying, but her role is deliberately understated, allowing the focus to remain on the family's unraveling. Internally, the true antagonist is the paranoia and fanaticism that corrode the family from within. The parents' rigid Puritan beliefs leave no room for ambiguity or doubt, and their fear of divine punishment drives them to seek blame for their misfortunes. This need to assign blame turns Thomasine into an easy target, and the resulting accusations only deepen the family's fractures. This duality, external evil versus internal strife, creates a compelling psychological tension. The family is trapped in a vicious cycle of fear and mistrust, with the external threat feeding their internal paranoia, and vice versa. The supporting characters are just as essential to the film's psychological depth, each playing a specific role in the family's unraveling. William, the father, is a portrait of pride and stubbornness. His unwavering faith and belief in his own righteousness blind him to the harm he causes his family. His decision to isolate them from their community sets the stage for their downfall. His refusal to admit fault only exacerbates their suffering. Yet William is not a villain. He's a deeply flawed man trying to do what he believes is right, making his ultimate fate all the more tragic. Catherine, the mother, is consumed by grief and suspicion. Her overwhelming sorrow over the loss of her infant son drives her to lash out at those closest to her, particularly Thomasine. Catherine's rigid adherence to her faith and her desperation for answers make her a catalyst for much of the family's discord. The twins, Mercy and Jonas, add a layer of unease with their mischievous and cryptic behavior. Their games with the family's goat, Black Phillip, take on a sinister tone as the story progresses, leaving us to question whether they're simply children caught in a terrifying situation, or something more malevolent? Their eerie innocence blurs the line between victim and instigator, adding to the film's overall ambiguity. Even Caleb, Thomasin's younger brother, plays a crucial role. His struggle with his budding adolescence and his guilt over his family's hardships reflect the film's themes of repression and temptation. His harrowing encounter with the witch is one of the film's most chilling moments, serving as a turning point in the family's descent into chaos. The characters in The Witch are not just victims of external forces, they're active participants in their own downfall. Their psychological depth and complex dynamics between them elevate the film beyond traditional horror, creating a story that is as much about the human condition as it is about supernatural terror. By the end of the film, each character has been changed, their individual arcs weaving together to form a chilling tapestry of paranoia, fanaticism, and despair. It's this focus on character that makes The Witch such a standout in the genre, leaving a lasting impact on viewers long after the lights have come back on. Symbolism is woven deeply into the fabric of The Witch, transforming its 17th century setting and supernatural narrative into a rich tapestry of metaphors that explore human psychology, societal dynamics, and existential fear. Let's dive into the layers of meaning that elevate the film into something far more than a simple horror story. One of the most striking symbols in The Witch is the goat, Black Phillip, who becomes a sinister and captivating presence. At first, he seems like nothing more than an unruly farm animal, but as the story unfolds, he emerges as a symbol of rebellion against Puritan values. In a world governed by rigid faith, Black Phillip represents temptation, freedom, and the allure of power. His whispered promises to Thomasin resonate as an invitation to reject her oppressive reality and embrace something darker but undeniably liberating. Shadows and reflection also play a significant role in the visual language of the film. The use of natural lighting and the interplay of light and dark create an atmosphere where shadows dominate, symbolizing the unseen forces at play within the family and their environment. Mirrors and reflective surfaces subtly hint at the fractured psyches of the characters, reflecting both their inner turmoil and the external pressures bearing down on them. The witch and the forest serve as dual symbols of repressed fear and forbidden desires. For the family, the forest is a place of both literal and metaphorical danger. Its dark, unknowable expanse represents the unknown, everything outside their control or understanding. It's a space where their strict beliefs provide no comfort, leaving them vulnerable to both external threats and their inner demons. The witch herself is a manifestation of the family's deepest anxieties. The fear of sin, the terror of feminine power and autonomy, and the fragility of their faith. But she's also more than a monster. She represents the freedom that comes from abandoning societal constraints. For Thomasin, the witch's existence challenges her understanding of right and wrong, forcing her to confront her own suppressed desires for independence and agency. The family's collapse into paranoia and distrust mirrors the psychological torment they endure. Guilt over past sins, the loss of loved ones, and their unyielding faith collide in a devastating spiral, with each character succumbing to their internal fears and doubts. This psychological unraveling is the true horror of the witch, far more than any supernatural entity. Beneath its historical setting, The Witch serves as a critique of religious fanaticism and the dangers of isolationism. The family's exile at the beginning of the film sets the stage for their destruction, highlighting how strict moral codes and unyielding beliefs can lead to paranoia, mistrust, and eventual self-destruction. The film also explores how rigid patriarchal structures contribute to the family's downfall. Thomasine, as the eldest daughter, is burdened with expectations and blame that far exceed her control. Her parents' unshakable faith blinds them to reality, turning their household into a powder keg of repression and suspicion. The witch, in this context, becomes a symbol not only of evil, but also of rebellion against these societal norms. Her power and autonomy stand in stark contrast to the family's helplessness, challenging the notion that submission and piety lead to salvation. Ultimately, the symbolism in The Witch transcends the 1630s setting to address timeless themes of fear, faith, and the fragile human. Through its visual metaphors, psychological depth, and biting social commentary, the film forces us to confront our own anxieties about belief, control, and the unknown. This layered approach to storytelling ensures that The Witch lingers in your mind, inviting endless interpretation and discussion, a hallmark of great cinema. The pacing and plot structure of The Witch are crucial to its power as a psychological horror film. Robert Eggers employs a deliberate, slow burn approach that immerses the audience in a world of creeping dread and escalating paranoia. Let's break down how this structure enhances the film's impact, keeps us on edge, and delivers an unforgettable finale. The Witch is the epitome of a slow burn horror film. From the opening scenes of the family's banishment to their isolated existence on the edge of the forest, the film builds tension gradually. Every detail, no matter how small, is designed to unsettle. The slow pacing allows the audience to absorb the oppressive atmosphere and the emotional toll that isolation, loss, and suspicion inflict on the characters. Rather than relying on frequent jump scares or sudden shocks, The Witch lets the psychological horror simmer. Each interaction between family members is loaded with tension. Every shadow in the forest hints at something lurking just out of sight, and every unexplained event tightens the grip of dread. This methodical pacing ensures that by the time the horror fully manifests, we in the audience are deeply invested in the characters and their unraveling psyches. One of the compelling aspects of The Witch is how it plays with our perception of reality. Eggers masterfully crafts a narrative where every event is open to interpretation. Is the family truly under siege by supernatural forces, or are they succumbing to paranoia and religious hysteria? For example, the vanishing of the infant Samuel sets off a chain of suspicion and despair, but the cause remains ambiguous. The mischievous behavior of the twins raises questions about their innocence. Are they simply children caught in a terrifying situation, or are they agents of chaos aligned with darker forces? These subtle shifts in perception keep us questioning what's real, building a sense of unease. And the film's twists are not grand revelations, but quiet, creeping realizations. We are led down a path of dread where small moments, a glance, a whispered word, or a fleeting shadow carry enormous weight. These moments accumulate, creating a narrative that feels inevitable, yet unpredictable. The film's climax and resolution are shrouded in ambiguity. Without delving into spoilers, the final sequence shifts the narrative in a way that feels both shocking and eerily fitting. Thomasine, the protagonist, is faced with choices that challenge everything that we have come to understand about her character and her circumstances. What makes the ending so impactful is its refusal to provide clear answers. Are we witnessing Thomasine's liberation from a repressive and destructive environment? Or has she succumbed to madness, unable to distinguish reality from her fractured psyche? Perhaps it's both. A descent into damnation that doubles as a form of freedom. This lack of resolution enhances the film's psychological depth, leaving us to grapple with our own interpretations. It's a conclusion that's haunting, and it haunts your mind and reinforces the film's overarching themes of fear, faith in the unknown. By combining a slow burn approach with subtle yet devastating twists and a finale steeped in ambiguity, The Witch achieves a rare level of psychological tension. Its pacing and structures are not just tools for storytelling, but integral to the film's ability to unsettle and provoke thought. Eggers' deliberate choices ensure that every moment feels both purposeful and deeply unnerving, making The Witch a true standout in the world of psychological horror. The Witch has left an undeniable mark on the psychological horror genre, its influence rippling through both filmmakers and audiences. Let's explore how this film revitalized the genre, its reception, and its rise to its current status as a modern classic. The Witch was a groundbreaking film in many ways, breathing new life into psychological horror with its commitment to historical accuracy, atmosphere, and the slow burn tension. Robert Eggers' meticulous attention to detail, whether in his authentic portrayal of 17th century Puritan life or his ability to draw horror from the mundane, set a new standard for immersive storytelling in the genre. This commitment to historical realism, combined with its oppressive atmosphere, has influenced a wave of filmmakers looking to explore psychological horror through a similarly immersive lens. Films like Hereditary and Eggers' own Lighthouse owe much of their attention to the blueprint that was laid down in The Witch. Ari Aster's Hereditary shares the same slow burn dread, family dynamics unraveling under the weight of tragedy and psychological strain, much like Thomasine's family in The Witch. Robert Eggers himself returned with The Lighthouse, which also employs isolated settings and psychological unease to tell a story that's as much about madness as it is about horror. Eggers' influence can also be seen in the current crop of films that prioritize atmosphere and internal conflict over external shocks. His work helped rejuvenate interest in more cerebral, less overtly violent forms of horror, films that aim to unsettle rather than merely frighten, and that leave lasting impressions through their psychological depth. When The Witch was released in 2015, it was met with critical acclaim for its artistry, its meticulous attention to detail, and the depth of its psychological themes. Critics hailed it as a landmark horror film, particularly appreciating its atmosphere, the stark beauty of its cinematography, and the way it built tension through subtlety rather than typical horror tropes. Mark Corvin's haunting score, the performances, especially Anya Taylor-Joy as Thomasine, and Eggers' careful direction all contributed to its critical success. However, not all reactions were positive. Audiences were divided, with some finding the film's slow pace and lack of overt scares a turnoff. Many expected more traditional horror elements, louder shocks, graphic violence, or more clear-cut supernatural threats, and were left frustrated with the ambiguity of the plot and its emphasis on psychological dread. The Witch was unsettling, but for some viewers, it felt like a lack of resolution. Over time, though, the film found a loyal fan base that appreciated its depth, and the critical reception has continued to grow even more positive with each passing year. Those who initially dismissed it as too slow or too abstract have come to recognize it as a modern classic. It's a film that invites deep reflection, and its atmosphere and symbolism resonate, which has cemented its place as a standout in the genre. As time has passed, The Witch has solidified its status as a modern classic in the world of psychological horror. Its influence on horror cinema is undeniable, and it continues to be studied and dissected by film critics, students, and fans alike. What began as a polarizing release has evolved into a cornerstone of 21st century horror. Its fans are passionate, and its themes of religious extremism, paranoia, isolation, and the breakdown of family have given it an enduring relevance. The film's growing fan base also speaks to its ability to invite multiple interpretations. The ending, its open-ended exploration of freedom, damnation, and identity, has prompted discussion and theories that keep the film alive in horror circles. Much like The Shining, it is a film that offers something new with each viewing, prompting fresh analysis and appreciation with every watch. The fan community surrounding The Witch thrives on this constant reinterpretation, building a rich mythology around the film's various layers. As a result, The Witch stands as one of the defining psychological horror films in its generation. Its success lies not in just its chilling atmosphere, but in its ability to provoke thought and inspire future filmmakers, all solidify its place as a deeply influential work in modern horror cinema. The Witch didn't just break new ground in terms of psychological horror. It reshaped the genre and influenced a whole new wave of filmmakers. Its critical evaluation and growing fan base have turned it into a cornerstone of horror cinema, ensuring its place in the pantheon of modern classics. It is a film that continues to haunt, disturb, and captivate, long after the forest has faded from view. The Witch is a film that lingers with you. It's a slow burn, psychological horror masterpiece that doesn't rely on cheap jump scares or graphic violence, but instead builds its terror through atmosphere, tension, and the unsettling nature of its themes. This film is a perfect example of how the genre can be both deeply unsettling and intellectually rewarding, offering much more than typical horror fare. Let's take a closer look at why The Witch stands as one of the finest examples of psychological horror in recent memory. One of the greatest strengths lies in its atmosphere. Eggers creates a world that feels as if it's suspended in time, almost as if we've been transported back to the 1630s. The setting, a bleak, isolated farmhouse on the edge of a dark and menacing forest, becomes a character in its own right. Eggers' decision to shoot largely with natural lighting and to avoid overtly stylized visuals gives the film a grounded, immersive quality. The isolation of the family feels real. There's no external salvation, no bustling village or nearby community to offer help. The forest surrounding them just as alive as the family itself, brimming with secrets and a sinister energy that grows as the family unravels. Then there's the authenticity of the film. Egger's commitment to historical accuracy is truly impressive. From the dialogue, which he drew from actual 17th century writings, to the details of the daily life for Puritans. The Witch immerses us in a world that's both alien, yet somehow terrifyingly familiar. This attention to detail not only elevates the film, but also makes the tension feel grounded in real, historical context. The paranoia and fear that grip the family aren't just figments of their imagination. They stem from the societal and religious pressures, making the terror more relatable and potent. But perhaps the film's greatest strength is its ambiguity. It leaves so much open to interpretation, and that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. The line between psychological horror and supernatural horror is blurred to the point where it's impossible to say definitively what is real and what is a manifestation of the family's fear and doubt. This ambiguity isn't frustrating. It's what gives the film its enduring power. The uncertainty about whether the witch is truly at work or whether the family is simply unraveling under the weight of isolation, guilt, and religious extremism is a key psychological element. It allows The Witch to transcend the boundaries of its genre and become a truly rich exploration of the human psyche. All that being said, The Witch isn't a film that's likely to appeal to everyone. Its deliberate pacing may be a hurdle for some viewers. In an age where audiences are accustomed to faster-paced, more immediately rewarding films, The Witch demands patience. The dread builds slowly, almost imperceptibly, and its ultimate emotional payoff comes from the accumulation of small moments of tension rather than one big climactic sequence. For some, this slow burn may feel tedious, particularly those expecting more conventional scares or faster resolution. Additionally, while the film's ambiguity is a major strength, it can also be seen as a drawback for those who prefer more clear-cut narratives. The ending, in particular, leaves a lot open to interpretation. Some may find this lack of resolution unsatisfying, especially if you're looking for closure or a definitive explanation of the events. But for those who enjoy films that leave room for discussion and reflection, The Witch provides a wealth of material to mull over. So what's my rating? Despite these minor drawbacks, The Witch is an exceptional film, and it's one that stands out in horror for its intellectual depth and psychological complexity. The atmosphere is unparalleled, the performances are stunning, and the film's exploration of faith, paranoia, and the unknown is both haunting and thought-provoking. The film is an immersive experience that gets under your skin, and its impact lingers. And for these reasons, I'm giving The Witch a 9.5 out of 10. My recommendation? Who should watch The Witch? Well, if you're a fan of psychological horror, if you appreciate films that explore the human mind, play with perception, and leave you questioning what's real, what's imagined, then this film is an absolute must-watch. The Witch is not for the faint of heart, but it's a powerful experience for those who enjoy horror that challenges the psyche. This film is also for anyone who appreciates a movie that makes you think, that doesn't just entertain but provokes deeper reflection on faith, guilt, and the destructive nature of fear. This is a film that offers layers of meaning that can be unpacked with each viewing. So if you're ready for a horror film that goes beyond the surface level and dives into something much darker, much more profound, then The Witch is waiting for you. The Witch is one of the most compelling and well-crafted psychological horror films in recent years. Its combination of historical realism, psychological depth, and slow burn tension make it a standout. While not for everyone, its influence and legacy are undeniable. If you're looking for a film that will leave you thinking, The Witch is an essential experience. Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk Horror Edition. It has been a pleasure diving into the unsettling world of The Witch with you. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share your thoughts on social media. Your feedback helps us grow and lets others know about the deep, dark conversations happening around here. If you have any personal reflections or theories about The Witch, feel free to drop a comment or tweet at us. Don't tweet at us, we're not there. We're on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk, or you can email me at therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Did you walk away questioning the supernatural? Or were you more intrigued by the family's unraveling psychological state? Let's continue the conversation, and I'll be happy to chat with you about your takes on the film. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Next time, we'll be exploring 2001's The Others, another chilling film that plays with paranoia and the fear of the unknown in deeply compelling ways. Trust me, it's a film you won't want to miss. If you're a fan of that slow burn psychological horror that keeps you guessing until the very end, The Others is a perfect follow-up to The Witch. Until then, stay curious, stay spooky, and keep exploring the shadows. Because in the world of horror, you never know what lurks just beyond the corner of your mind. Catch you next time.
Creeping through the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape. Others play a twisted game. Fear and terror stake their claim. Footsteps follow close behind. Haunting thoughts invade your mind. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll always stay. Windows rattle, doors they creak. Ghostly whispers start to speak. Every corner hides a fear. Close your eyes, they're drawing near. Candles flicker, spirits call.